We're asking for numbers here, Ken. So could you provide some insights to the current EBITDA multiple that businesses are selling for?
The all-in packages are going between 4, 4.5, and 5, maybe 5.5.
One to TTA's webinar series called Mastering Business Essentials. Today is the first of the 6-part series, and we've got Ken Lucci with us. Before handing it over to Ken, I want to say that this series is sponsored by Bambi, which is the most stupidly easy to use and powerful NEMT scheduling and dispatch software. And as for TTA, many of you must be familiar with the TTA, but in case you're not already a member, here's 4 quick reasons about why you should join. Number 1, you get educational resources and industry insights. So exclusive webinars like this one with Ken Lucci today, seminars, training sessions, newsletters, reports, publications, all that good stuff. Number 2, advocacy and representation. TTA has already built channels to advocate in the government for things that we care about. So you get to be part of directly having your voice heard about things you care about. Number 3, networking events. So you get to connect with industry leaders, experts, fellow TTA members at open houses. And the big kahuna networking event is TTA's Mobilize Conference, which this year is at Paris, Las Vegas. I don't think I need to say anything more. Number 4, you get discounts majorly on all the things I just mentioned. And for the TTA Mobilize Conference, $1,000 discount for a booth, any booth size for exhibitors, and a few $100 just as an attendee. So with that, join the TTA, and I'm going to hand it over to Ken Lucci, who is principal analyst at Driving Transactions, and he's going to talk to us about mastering financial metrics to build enterprise value. Ken, over to you.
Really appreciate the introduction and really appreciate TTA inviting me to do this workshop. This is a subject that we could do deep dive on all day long, but we're going to talk about, let me share my screen. We're going to talk about the best way, let everybody see that, strategies to increase enterprise value, and financial metrics that impact the value of your business. At the end of this, there's going to be some Q&A time, hopefully. And also, we offer a 30-minute, no obligation consultation on any subject, and we're available by both email and by Zoom session. So Driving Transactions, you find us at drivingtransactions.com. We are a financial analysis, strategic consulting, and M&A advisory service. We specialize in transportation. That's all we do. We provide profit and income reviews, business valuations, and M&A advisory services. We have 2 types of clients. We have 70% of our businesses are operators in the passenger transportation space that want to either grow, borrow, buy, or sell. Lots of people come to us for enterprise valuations and also exit profit reviews. And 30% of our businesses is working with commercial lenders who provide us with blind financial statements to review and reformat and assist them with lending decisions. So we have reviewed 270 companies in the passenger space from $1 million to $150 million. So consequently, we have expert insight into the industry. We've reviewed companies from $1 million to $150, from 5 vehicles to 500 vehicles in the chauffeur space, taxi and black car space, bus space, and school bus, and non-emergency medical transportation, and pretty much everything in between. So I always start talking to business owners. I mean, the engine of this country is small business owners. And we use the phrase internally, every company is a business, but not all businesses are a company. Now, I bring this up because if you ever want to sell your business, you really have to morph it into a sellable company. And there are specific things that 100% are differentiated between a lifestyle business and a sellable company. Lifestyle business, the owner is a worker, laborer 7 days a week. They're in the business doing specific functions that other people would do if they weren't there. The lifestyle business lacks people, processes, policies, procedures, and profits. Typically, they're less concerned about their financial practices because they're, small business, but that hurts you when you go to sell. And I always say that the business suffers or ends when the owner suffers or ends, God forbid. Sellable companies have specific attributes. They grow profitably. Those are two equal objectives. And we're going to give you some details today about the consequences of growing without profit. The businesses have formal structures and systems. They have written policies, procedures, and processes that are updated. They have an executable business plan, and they have consistent net profits and a healthy EBITDA. EBITDA is the magic phrase, the magic acronym to enterprise value, and they have accurate financial statements. So when we first talk to our operator clients, we say the time to focus on what your business is worth is certainly not the day you want to start the exit process. You want to build real enterprise value by growing and using strategies that grow profitably every year. Number one, focus on profitable growth only, not just churning money. Knowing your gross profit margins. We're going to talk about this ad nauseum today, about knowing what you make on each service, each vehicle type, and each contract. Know and manage your critical financial metrics and KPIs. Fix the unhealthy metrics long before you want to exit. Diversify your revenue, your service, and your customers. Fleet size and trip count is not a measure of success. Ideally, you want to have less than 20% of your revenue with any one specific client, or it will affect the sale of the business. You want to have profit margins, gross margins. In other words, the money you make for every trip to be above 30%. You want to maximize your owner W-2 income that's on the books. Don't starve yourself. I mean, we have a founder on the call with us from Bambi. I hope he's paying himself well on the books, because you shouldn't be starving yourself. You shouldn't be paying yourself off book, or you shouldn't be doing just year-end distribution. You want to maximize owner compensation so that we can prove that when we want to go and we want to sell the business. Predictable net operating income and operating profits, managing your cost and expense structure, forecasting and your revenue growth. And I like to say managing your monthly budget and pulling the levers, adjusting the levers along the way. Don't be just reactive from a financial perspective, looking at your financials at the end of every year. So a few strategies we're going to start with before we get into the actual financial metrics. If you want to improve enterprise value, grow profitably, consistently, both in revenue and NOI, net profit, right? One with the revenue growth alone is not going to increase value. I'd rather have a company that grows a little bit less and then shows a nicer profit. We're going to give you some stark examples of that today. So we recommend you create an annual financial and profit roadmap. We'd like to see businesses looking for a goal of 10% annual growth with healthy NOI, healthy profits, and an EBITDA, which we'll discuss a little bit later, of above 15%. The great thing about a strategic business plan is it doesn't have to be complex. You can rally your team and rally your people around the annual goals. And it's working on your business instead of toiling in the business. And banks and buyers love to see businesses that have achieved the written plan and achieved their goals. Now, you don't have to be overly complicated. When we work with our clients, we start with a 2-page annual business plan. What's the outline of your major bullets that you're going to accomplish this year, and put a monthly budget behind it with a 12 forecast. I always like to say to entrepreneurs, your annual business plan should encompass 2 phrases. How can, that's the positive stuff. That is, how can I grow my revenue? How can I improve my profits? The what if is, what if my key dispatcher leaves? What if something happens to me? And you don't have to have a 25-page business plan. There are some great resources that are free. SBA is a great business plan outline, by the way. Strategy number 2 is to price services to create adequate profits. You have to know your gross profit, the money you make on every trip. We're going to really identify the perils of not doing that. And you have to have a good NOI every single year. The only way to do that is manage monthly financial statements. I know it's not as sexy as looking at the Bambi revenue reports that are great, right? The reservation system tells you all the trips, the revenue, but We have to look at the cost side. We have to look at the profit side. We have to look at the overhead side. So we tell people, operators, price for predictable profits, create long-term enterprise value. The cost structure of your business and your desired profits have to dictate your pricing, not what your competitor is charging. If you're in the business of maxing a low price, that's not going to create enterprise value. Create an annual pricing pro forma on all your services with current costs, right? Because everything goes up every single year. All of your pricing, and we'll go through some of those today. You want to maintain gross profits that are above industry averages, not below. And as a general rule, above revenue pricing per trip adds to enterprise value. Being the low price leader really does reduce the value. That's more prevalent now post-pandemic than ever before. And buyers tell me this all of the time. They are more interested in solid margins, solid NOI to build from, great structural foundation. The number one issue we see is people not pricing properly. They have a history of low profits. They're not managing their costs. And we'll give you some keys to manage today. So this is another big one. Fixing the operational issues of your business before you consider exiting. If you have outdated job descriptions, operations manuals, you're depending on one or two people with no bench ready to train, cross-train, that is something you should really look at before you want to exit. Your fleet assets. Old fleets hurt you at the time of sale. You want to maintain your fleet. You want to take advantage of fleet depreciation along the way. But in general, we like to see businesses that have greater than 50% fleet equity, but also 30% remaining useful life. Now, why is that? Buyers don't want to come in and pay top dollar for business, then have to spend millions on hundreds of thousands or millions on a brand new fleet. They want breathing room and they want to start return on investment. Can't emphasize this enough. Using technology to reduce labor and reduce risk, improve efficiency everywhere you can, and your client metrics. The second biggest problem we see beyond low price and not knowing your pricing is the owner of the business is toiling every single day on the business, and honestly, the business cannot survive without them. So that is something that really, if you want to sell the business for a good value, you have to solve those issues by cloning yourself, mind meld, if you will, everything you know, put it on paper, and train somebody else to do the function so that you can act as an owner and you can work on the strategy of the business. That's a big issue because the number one telltale sign of a lifestyle business is an owner that is not able to leave without the business suffering. Number 4, build a company that a buyer would pay more to recreate. So let's talk about that. If the buyer can make a credible case that they can spend less money than what you're asking for the business won't sell. So what do I mean by that? If they can duplicate the revenue, duplicate the profits, duplicate the market share, and duplicate the customer for less than you're asking, they will make the mistaken case in their mind that, hey, I'm just going to start a business in this market. Absolutely. Top 1, 2, and 3 companies in the markets always sell. And we like to say we can sell any company. It's just, in a lot of cases, it won't be what the seller wants if they are not demonstrating all the things we talked about. So when we do valuation process or represent somebody for sale, one of the things we have to do for the bank and the buyer is to do a cash flow analysis and a financial pro forma. So your valuation has to be based on a financial reality that the loan payments or the payments to the seller or the return on investment, the business has to cash flow. So building a real company, cannot emphasize this enough. It's boring stuff, right? People cross-train, processes updated, policies, procedures. Most importantly, profits, right? But the principal should be focusing on strategy. If you're the primary dispatcher, really need to clone yourself, work on the business, because That is a telltale sign of a lifestyle business. So the owner, we like to say, should make them the least important person in the actual day-to-day. The business should function without you, and the cogs should be continue to turn. The owner really should focus on key strategy, key relationships, business plan execution, and ongoing P&L financial management. And you should work on your business and your exit plan long before you want to exit. Number one P is profit. Have to demonstrate on a set of financial statements that the business is profitable. You make money on every trip. Companies that cannot show consistent profits, they don't sell, or they sell for well below market. Okay, so let's get into the major financial metrics that impact enterprise value. And again, you are going to have this presentation. You're going to have the video. We will email you the presentation if you want, or you can schedule 30 minutes to go into this in more detail. So let's talk about the most important revenue trends and revenue concentration. This is what enhances value. Consistent year-over-year growth. It doesn't have to be quadruple digits, double digits. It could be 5%, 7%, 10%. The key is budget and have a growth plan and grow based on the most profitable silos. We're going to show you some stark contrast here. Diversify revenue streams or service silos so that you're not dependent on just one type of service. Look at the contracted revenue streams you have. How solid are those contracts? And profitable revenue only. Know your gross profit. Know whether you're making money on those trips. Here's some cautions. Declining revenue trends are not good in this market. We have an aging population. We have a population that NEMT is growing by double digits. As an industry, and the need, your company has to also. Poor financial record keeping, horrible. It hurts enterprise values. I'm not talking about paying, maximizing what we pay in tax here. I'm talking about keeping accurate record keeping and managing the financials. Other caution, if the majority of revenue generated is by one or two clients, that is going to hurt values, but it will also impact terms, right? So if I have a large client that's 40, 50% of my business, I'm going to have to prove that client's going to stay after the sale, right? And maybe that's going to impact whether I stay with the business after the sale. It's less about, it is about hurting value, but it's also about adjusting the terms of sale because the buyer is afraid that big client that's 30, 40, 50% of the business is going to go away. So what's the best thing to do about that? Diversify your revenue streams, diversify the service types that you offer. Lack of acceptable gross profits on all trips really, or contracts, hurts values. You're going to see two stark examples of what to do and what not to do today. So everybody thinks of their financial statements as typical financial statements are for tax purposes. It's a bucket of income and a bucket of expenses. Now, when you're in an industry the way we are, where there's so much that goes into providing the service, so many costs, right? We recommend and buyers look for metrics that a typical P&L doesn't tell them unless they really do a lot of work on it. So typical P&Ls for tax purposes tells you whether you made a profit or a loss. And this is really no breakdown by income source, no accurate cost of goods, no direct cost as a percentage of total labor. Like they don't really separate out all of their drivers from their administrative labor. So they really can't say how much it costs as a percentage of income to provide the service. Doesn't have accurate gross profit. Their overhead and G&A is not broken down. So let's give you some great examples of one that is. Okay, this is a cost of goods format financial statement. Boring stuff. But this is what buyers look for, and this is what format we recommend. So I'm going to show you some examples as to why. Total income of this business is growing, right? It was 2022. They had a real high mark. They went down a little bit. But when we started working with them, we looked at their revenue silos, and we figured out that one of the 35% of their business, they were only making 12% gross profit on it. And I'll drill down into that more, but that means that for every $100 they made on that contract trip, they were making $12, whereas the rest of their business, they were making a 43, 48% gross profit. So where do we want to grow that business, right? We want to grow that business in the most profitable segments and contracts that we can. The only way we know that is to break down revenue by source, right? So all of the reservation systems will allow you to do this. And I've not detailed Bambi, but I would love to. The key there is revenue silos and knowing what you make on every single trip. We're going to get into all of these other metrics as well. So what goes into cost of goods? Everything it takes to turn the key. That is our test. Ask yourself a question on the cost of the expense. Do you need this to turn the key and to do the trip? We got another list in the next slide, by the way, right? So that goes right below revenue. And the most important key there is your total, your gross profit left over, because that's the money you have left over to pay yourself, pay overhead, and to show a profit, and that all-important EBITDA. So what are the silos? Okay, here are the silos. Direct labor, watch the overtime. If you have the model that's a W-2 employee or even a subcontract model, it should be 21 to 27% of total income. Your fleet vehicle, that's the cost of the fleet, 7 to 10% of your total income generated, right? So for every $1,000 that you generate, that's what $70 goes to pay for the vehicle. Fleet insurance is a big one. You can absolutely expect that we're going to continue to see increases in 25 and 26. I like to say, unfortunately, it's a permanent hard market as far as the cost of insurance. Repair and maintenance. We are really seeing excessive downtime, even on warranted equipment. So total repair and maintenance should be 4 to 6% of total income. This is where the old fleet comes in. If the old fleet is costing you more to maintain, it's going to hurt the value of your business, it's going to hurt your profits. And then we have fuel and fluids. Here's the bottom line. Small to medium-sized companies should be able to turn the key and do the work and spend 65 cents out of every buck they collect, or $65 out of a $100 trip goes to your direct cost. Good news, leaves you with a gross profit margin of greater than 35. Large companies, more cost of goods, less gross margin. Good news, usually on the large companies above 10 million, you're going to have overhead and G&A more efficient. You're going to have less overhead, G&A overhead, and you're going to be able to do more trips, so you don't necessarily get hurt by the lower gross margin. So next metric, seller compensation, seller discretionary earnings. That absolutely comes into play when you go to sell your business. Seller discretionary earnings is what's on the P&L that I can take as a business valuation or a buyer, and I can take it off the P&L because the buyer is not going to inherit it unless you stay on for a long period of time. So your owner W-2 and the majority of all your consideration, company car, cell phone, health insurance, life insurance, all that stuff should be on the P&L. Avoid the year-end distribution model. If you're only taking year-end distributions or occasionally taking money out of the business, that's typically a cash item. That's a balance sheet issue. I can't add it back. So in this example, this is a real example of a business that's been in business for a long time and the owner doesn't show a W-2, okay? So is the owner working for free? When that comes into play in an enterprise value, if we look at that owner and they're doing more than full-time work, that has to be replaced. And that's going to hurt an already, in this case, really not great profitability, right? So seller compensation, critically important. Here's some examples of poor net ordinary income and valuation trends. This is a business that if you look at the way they grew, they went from 16 million to 19.5 to 19.2, but their metrics got worse. So their value got worse. Growth without profit, low profit margins, operating at a loss. I don't show the detail, but this is a case where the owner was not taking out a W-2 and they had lots of low profit contracts. It's going to be a difficult business to sell. Will we sell it? Sure. but not at a maximum value. We'll go into the metrics, but look at how off on the targets they are. The target for a company this size should be, out of 19 million in revenue, they should have spent 70% on all of the cost to provide the service. They should have had 30% left over for gross profit, right? They should have had a target of G&A at 20%. When you get that big, you have to have efficiencies in your overhead. Most importantly, those contracts cost them profits, right? Look at 2022. This business was better off, smaller, more controlled, and look at that EBITDA, which is the multiple valuation multiple is derived from your NOI, net operating income, and your EBITDA. So those are the targets. Now let's look at another example. Smaller business, right? Oh no, this, how can this be? Smaller business can't be as valuable. Yeah, it really is. It's actually more valuable. Grown from 4.7 to 5.3. Look at the total cost of goods. This business has a different mix. It has diversified clients. It's had some great private pay stuff, has a lot of diversification. They have gross margin above 40%. They're low. I like to see 27% G&A for a company this size, 25 to 27, but they're paying themselves a good W-2. The NOI is solid, growing. Most importantly, the valuation metric that is always the data used is EBITDA, well above the other companies. So you can make the case that this company is more valuable, and we'll talk about the other metrics, more valuable than a company almost 3 times its size. Blended profitable services, higher gross margins, exceptional operating profit, so high EBITDA, going to be a very attractive business to sell. So here are the factors that impact the value of your business that you should be focusing on the most from a financial perspective. Profitable revenue trends, high trip volume and low profits, not good. Superior blended gross profit margins should be 30 to 35%. Reward yourself for being an entrepreneur. You should be paying yourself a high W-2, a good solid W-2. The IRS says they'd like to see you have 65% of your total compensation in a W-2 on the P&L. But we want you to be able to run legitimate expenses through your business. As long as they're on the P&L, I get to add them back and it adds to your profit. Your consistent NOI, operating profits from the day-to-day trip revenue generation. And then we like to see EBITDA above 15. So what else is important? Above and beyond all of the things we talked about in the original strategies, pristine and accurate financial statements and record keeping. I cannot emphasize that enough. Banks and buyers want to see financial statements in order that track to tax returns, that track to Bambi reservations example. If you have tons of revenue, or you have a revenue discrepancy from your financial statements to your reservations and dispatch software, it's a problem. So they should substantially match. Client contracts and revenue concentration, something to look at. If you have large contracts and it's a majority of your business, you might have to stay on to make sure that that client stays. And the contract should be really solidly written, and it should transfer to another owner. Longevity and the number of client relationships in your market is key. Location, competition, and growth potential of your market. Scalability of your existing infrastructure. Right? If you consider it like a house, if the foundation is solid and you can put a second story on top of it with the same people and the same infrastructure, even just adding vehicles and drivers, and more revenue, obviously, that's a great sellable company. Fleet configuration and condition does make a difference. Again, just think of it this way. You're not going to pay top dollar for a business if you have to invest in the fleet immediately after you buy the business. You're going to buy it, but you're going to pay less for it because you have that additional capital. Staffing and operations and technology, all I can say is get as efficient with technology as you possibly can. The best reservations and dispatch system, the most efficiency that you can get. All right, so here's a well-planned, seller-controlled, proactive exit process. Step 1, 2, and 3 is to review the business and put a value on it. Then, if you have any operational issues, fix them, whether they're financial, operational. They may take 18 to 36 months. There is no such thing as starting an exit process too early. The next steps in the process are assemble data. This is what we do in the data room, e-files. We create a confidential information package. We market the business for sale. We entertain qualified buyers. We love to have multiple offers and counter with strength. I would avoid, if I owned a business, signing an exclusive with a buyer who approached me, because they want you alone. They want you on your own, and you need good representation. We're going to talk about who's on your team. Then what we do is we execute a letter of intent. This is the whole process. And we draft transaction agreements, help close the transaction. And a big part of trying to sell your business is what's a post-closing transition plan. What's going to happen? When can you exit? Some sellers want to exit the day they sell. Other times, they may want to stay on. Pretty important. Here's your team: an industry specialist that knows how to value your business, a certified and experienced tax planner. You cannot spend too much money on a good tax planner. Usually it's not your CPA. Believe it or not, 95% don't have tax planning certification. And I'd investigate all my options for seller proceeds well in advance of selling my business. What am I going to do with that money? And how am I going to not pay a ton of taxes? You're going to want a certified and experienced financial planner. I argue any small business person should have that. As soon as their business becomes profitable, early in their career, they should have a good, solid financial planner. You need an M&A transaction attorney. A typical general counsel is not good enough. These are very specialized transactions. And you need your current CPA to make sure that everything is available, everything is accurate, and everything can be created instantly. If he's backed up, you want to get everything done in advance. Oh, by the way, don't try to sell your business between January and April, because that's a tough time. Get prepared well in advance and with all the data, and your CPA will have everything done for you. Here are the 8 drivers of company value. I'm going to take you through this. We do a scoring. Number 1 is financial performance and profitability. Number 2 is the quality of the revenue, gross margins, contracts, contract language. Longstanding repeat customers are great. We have to look at, if the vast majority of revenue comes from one client, that's what's called the Switzerland effect. How dependent is the business on one employee, one customer, one vendor, or one software provider? Client satisfaction, how are your scores? How is your on-time performance? What are your QA scores, quality assurance scores? Growth potential in the market. Something I want to stress here is buyers buy companies that have great growth potential, but they don't pay sellers for that potential. If you think your business has growth potential and the value would increase if you took it to the next level, take it to the next level now and get there, and your enterprise value will absolutely increase. Your capital and cash position. Is your business always having to have lines of credit? Is it a cash suck or a nice cash spigot? Do you have cash on the balance sheet? Very, very important. Competitive advantage. Are you the biggest 1, 2, or 3 in your area? Those always sell. And then what's your role in the business, right? As entrepreneurs, the most important thing you can do is design a business that exists without you. Hey, you may not want to sell it if you do that. It may become a cash cow if you get great people in place that can, instead of you burning out. So that's the end of the presentation. I would open up for chat or open up for questions. You can also email me at klucci@drivingyouриncome.com, or you can visit drivingtransactions.com and schedule a 30-minute presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and see if we can open it up. For questions. I'll even take some from my friend from Bambi, because you build the reservation software, which is like the cash register, right? The cash register has to match the financial statements. Okay. And that's in a lot of cases. We see that they don't, right? We see for some reason people aren't closing trips, they're not closing out the month on a timely basis. So there's a difference. So any questions?
Yes. All right. Everyone, please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. Ken, thank you for a comprehensive presentation. I'm going to start off with the first question in the Q&A box from Chase Lafferty. Does paying yourself through a management company instead of W-2, which shows on P&L, hurt your enterprise value?
No, because any management fees should be on your P&L, right? So this opens two discussion points. Should you have a employee leasing company or a management company separate from your operating entity? Sure. Could you pay yourself out of that? Absolutely. The key, Chase, is it has to hit the P&L, right, as a management fee. Then we would look at how we adjust that. And the key is if you're taking excessive management fees compared to the person that replaces you, or you don't need to be replaced, that helps your value. The other thing I want to talk about is the leasing company owning your vehicles. We see that a lot of times. We see people doing that from a risk management perspective. It's a good strategy based on if you're a bigger company, I'd say it makes sense when you're 10 million plus to have those assets in a separate leasing company. Talk to your CPA because there's a lot of financial benefits. There's a lot of tax advantages to doing that. So Chase, doesn't hurt you as long as those management fees are above the line on the P&L. What I mean by above the line, above net ordinary income, those fees should be in your G&A and your overhead.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. This next question, also from Chase Lafferty, is a fun one that I gotta imagine should be on the minds of almost everyone in the audience. And we're asking for numbers here, Ken. So could you provide some insights to the current EBITDA multiple that businesses are selling for? And
100%.
is there a variance between NEMT versus black car versus taxi, etc.?
So when I showed that those 8 performance metrics that we measure when we score the business, we have our own that internal scoring and weighting system that moves you through the multiple scale, right? So low profit's going to be low multiple. High revenue concentration with one client may add a little bit of a risk factor, but it's not going to kill your multiple. It's just going to add a little bit of risk to the terms. So from a multiple perspective, I'm going to take you to there's 3 categories: local, regional, and what I'll call network or national, right? Local regional companies are going to be between 2 and 3.5, and that's without fleet. When you talk about with fleet, as long as the fleet fits those attributes of greater than 50% equity and 30% remaining useful life, then your all-in package multiples are going between 4 and 5, 4 and 5.5, if that makes sense. Because if one of your competitors who has a brand new fleet or have a big fleet and they have more capacity, if they want to buy you, they may say to you, Chase, you know what? Sell off your fleet on your own. So your business has cash flow value, and then it has hard asset value. Cash flow value is between the 2s and the 3s, the 3.5s alone, depending upon different factors, got to be profitable. And then the all-in packages are going between 4, 4.5, and 5, maybe 5.5, if that makes sense.
All right.
Now,
Thank you.
as far as the insight, I have to tell you the multiples are almost the same around the NEMT, black car, and taxis are a little lower. Taxis are a little bit more difficult to pinpoint because if I'm running a taxi business and I'm leasing my vehicles out to my drivers and my profits are there based on those leases, the multiples are a little bit different, right? But in general, fleet companies in general are going to go within that metric. And you're going to get on the high scale if you are a market leader, 1, 2, or 3 in your market, if you've got the best contracts that are the most ironclad and profitable, right? And you've got a real solid foundation and fleet.
Cool. Thank you, Ken. Before I get to the next question, I see that Shalonda has her hand raised. Shalonda, if you can just type your question into the Q&A, then I can ask Ken. Um, Next question is from Dawn Lilly. She's saying, my CPA said to close the leasing company and put all vehicles under the transport. Can you provide examples of benefits of keeping the assets separate? He seems to think
Sure.
it complicates taxes and creates insurance gaps.
So, there's always two schools of thought. I can tell you the bigger your company and the more diversified, that's when I'm seeing the separate leasing company is a tactic and strategy of the largest players in the space. And I like to draw the distinction. If you're 5 million and 30, 40 years old and growing, and you want to grow to the business over 10 million, start the process now. When you separate to a leasing company, okay, separate leasing company, you can charge the operating company management fees for that leasing. You can charge them a delta on top of your insurance. And it also separates risk because if there's a problem, somebody who's coming after you is going to see that you've got assets in a different company. And again, it's got to be a legitimate leasing company, though. So I would yield to whoever your CPA is based on the size of your business. You might be too small where it doesn't make sense. But if your business is growing and you're in the midst of, you've got a third left in your career, there's a lot of benefits to it if you're a certain size. So please reach out to me, Don, and email me, and we'll get into more particulars. But the leasing company on the leasing of equipment, the vehicles, is a strategy of the larger fleet operators in the industry.
Okay. Next one is from Mary Kay, and this one seems pretty straightforward. So she's saying our NEMT company is debt-free. We don't carry loans. All debt is paid as it is accrued. Will this help or hurt our company in the long run? Should we be financing vehicles? We buy them brand new with cash as needed.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a really, really strong balance sheet. We didn't go into the boring details of balance sheet ratio, but in general, I want you to be able to take advantage of depreciation. I don't want you paying heavy tax, Mary. I don't want you paying heavy tax every year. So I would say that it's a healthy mix, that when you look at your business and you're managing it financially through the year, you have a budget, as long as you know, if you've got 6 months under your belt, that's when we start to do tax planning. Okay. And if you have 6 months under your belt, you start planning on, oh boy, if we do the same we did as last year, July, August, September, etc. Wow, this is what the tax is going to look like. So you may want to exercise buying a piece of equipment so you can capture 1079 depreciation. By the way, watch what's happening in Washington on those the tax cut extensions, because that's going to help us. So in general, love the fact that you're debt free. Okay. But I don't want to see you paying heavy operating heavy tax, right? So you've got your E for earnings, that's your profit, but then I want that depreciation, right? I want that depreciation. I want you to take advantage of that. So I would say to you, do a little bit of a blend. There's nothing wrong with being debt free, but there's tax advantages to buying a piece of equipment and depreciating it. But again, reach out and I can give you some more examples.
All right, thank you. Next one is from Shalonda. Can you please drill down a little on NEMT industry cost of goods sold items? I hear many different theories.
Interesting. Okay, so we have a strict cost of goods, the strict cost of goods model on our chart of accounts, and we have a financial course as well. But the strict cost of goods is everything it takes to literally turn the key and do the work. Okay. And that's not your order intake person, it's not your dispatch person, it's not your reservation software. Here's why. Just restricted to what it takes to turn the key and do the work. So that means your direct labor should be separated. Driver labor should be separated from administrative and overhead labor. We're finding it's if you're operating, either you own the vehicles, you're operating a W-2 or subcontract model for your direct labor, it's still 21 to 27% of total income. Then you have the cost of the vehicle. that can be expressed as depreciation or the loan, the principal and interest. But you have to have the fleet expense up there to get the gross profits we're talking about. Then it's the fleet insurance, it's the repair and maintenance, it's the detailer. Some people like to put credit card processing if you do a lot of private. We don't, but you don't put any supervisory in there. And here's why. You want just what it takes to turn the key so that when someone comes to look and buy you, we want your gross profit as high as possible, because think about it. They're going to fold you in typically to their own overhead process. So that's the purpose of having a COGS P&L. So 21 to 27% on labor, 7 to 10% is going to be your fleet cost, depending upon how aggressive your depreciation is. Repair and maintenance, 4 to 6%. If it starts going much higher, that kind of pointing to maybe you have an older fleet. The fleet insurance, 5 to 7% of total income. You got to watch that, because fleet insurance is really killing everything to do with passenger transportation, especially the NEMT. And then the little things like detailing, well, about 0.5% of total income. But reach out and based on the volume, I'll give you the closest I can to your COGS percentages.
All right. Next is a question from Ryan. As an NEMT company with an owner-operator model, what is the most important metric we should be looking at to evaluate and or value one owner-operator to the next?
You're gonna have to expand that I don't particularly understand the question. You're an owner operator model, meaning you're subcontracting out your vehicles and the drivers. If you can expand on that, I can tell you the number one metric to me, if in any event, is the gross margin on all of the work that you do. So to me, that's the key. If you are paying owner operators to do the work, you can't pay them more than 70% of the total trip revenue, because you won't have enough left over for overhead and to pay yourself and to show a profit. But Ryan, do me a favor, reach out to me by email, klucci@drivingyouриncome.com, and we'll expand on that Q&A if you can.
Okay, we've got a question from Jacob that builds on Shalanda's question. So staying with COGS, cost of goods sold, is there an industry-leading example of the overtime percentage of total driver wages? In a situation where that exceeds a target goal, is that negatively reflected in the enterprise value?
100%. I'm going to give you an example. We work with a company and we do their monthly financial review, and we saw that their gross profit margins total was, in this particular case, based on their metrics, they had to be above 35% because of the size of their business and their overhead. And we noticed that their cost of goods went from 65 to 73%. So we're looking, and 2 months in a row, they showed a loss. Okay. And it was because of overtime. It was because of overtime pay on the driver. So here's the key, Jacob. When you look at your driver labor as the percentage of income, we find its total should be 21 to 27% for the month. Okay. When you have dispatchers that are not really in tune with who's going to go into overtime versus not, look at that metric. If that total driver labor creeps over what your healthy financial should be, which is 21 to 27 for several months in a row, you definitely have an overtime issue. In general, I like to see overtime at less than 10% of total driver labor. Now, look, we're in a tough labor market, but the key is you can't pay massive amounts of overtime, or it's going to affect your total cost of goods. It's going to drive you up above that 65 to 70%, right? And your gross margins are not going to be sustainable. That is the number one variable metric that people don't measure enough, is the overtime. In that example, we figured that out. We went to the dispatcher and he's like, look, we're going to have to supplement with IOs, and we're going to have to find drivers. And they did. But it was because they brought the metric to the attention of the dispatcher, and they found it was one specific contract that they needed to hire for. So I hope that helps you out.
All right. Thank you, Ken. It looks like that is all of the questions. So we're going to wrap up here. To everyone in the audience, this is being recorded and this episode will be released next Wednesday on the NEMT Experts podcast hosted by Bambi. I will be putting the contact info of Ken Lucci and Driving Transactions in the description of this video. A big thank you again to TTA for putting on this show and to Ken Lucci for sharing your wisdom. And again, his contact info will be in the description of this video. So feel free to reach out to TTA or myself to get in touch with Ken. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having a great day. And Narad, thank you so much for sponsoring. Check out Bambi. And again, the reservation software, that is the cash register of the business. So if you're going old school, or if you got an old reservation software that doesn't give you all the latest and greatest, that's very important for enterprise value because technology efficiency is key. So thank you very much. And thanks again for inviting me, TTA. Appreciate it.